The blizzard came down from the mountains like God's own fury, and Lillian Garrett knew with absolute certainty that she would die alone on this frozen trail if she did not find shelter within the hour. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves 2 miles back, and her horse had given up fighting the drifts, plodding forward with mechanical determination that worried her more than if he had balked entirely. The January wind of 1884 cut through her wool coat as though it were nothing more than cotton, and the Wyoming territory stretched endlessly white in every direction she could see through the driving snow. She had left Cheyenne 3 days ago with a wagon train headed for Montana, carrying with her everything she owned and every hope she had left after her father's death. But the train had split up yesterday when half the travelers decided to wait out the weather in a settlement to the east, and she had been fool enough to continue on with the smaller group that believed they could outrun the storm. They had been wrong. The group had scattered when the blizzard hit in earnest, each family frantically seeking their own salvation, and now Lillian was utterly, completely alone, her vision blurred with ice crystals and tears that froze on her lashes. She had stopped feeling her feet an hour ago. The horse stumbled, recovered, stumbled again. She tried to speak words of encouragement to the animal, but her jaw was so cold she could barely move it. This was how it ended then. 22 years old, frozen solid on a trail in Wyoming, and no one would even find her body until spring. Then, through the white chaos, she saw it. A dark shape that might have been a building. She blinked hard, certain it was a hallucination, but it remained. A cabin, small but solid-looking, with smoke rising from a chimney that the wind tried desperately to scatter. Lillian urged her horse toward it with the last of her strength. The animal seemed to sense salvation, and found some reserve of energy she had thought completely spent. They stumbled forward through drifts that reached the horse's chest, and somehow, impossibly, they reached a small barn adjacent to the cabin. She half fell, half climbed down from the saddle, her legs nearly buckling when they hit the ground. The barn door was closed but not latched, and she managed to pull it open far enough to lead her horse inside. The relief from the wind was immediate and overwhelming. 3 other horses stood in stalls, watching her with mild curiosity, and the smell of hay and animals felt like the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced. She knew she should tend to her horse properly, but her body had other ideas. Her vision was darkening at the edges, and she knew if she did not get warm immediately, survival would remain out of reach even here. She fumbled her way back to the barn door and out into the storm, staggering the 20 feet to the cabin's front porch like a drunk. She tried to knock, but her hand barely made a sound against the wood. She tried again, harder, and this time managed a weak thump. Nothing. She was going to die on someone's front porch, so close to warmth and life. She raised her hand one more time and used her whole body weight to bang against the door. It opened so suddenly, she nearly fell inside. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that registered immediate understanding of her situation. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with several days of beard growth on a strong jaw and the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. He wore a simple wool shirt and denim pants, and the warmth that rolled out from behind him felt like heaven itself. "I have been waiting for this storm," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. He reached out and caught her arm as she swayed. "Knew it would bring someone to my door eventually. The trail runs too close to my land for it not to. Come in before you freeze to death on my porch." Lillian tried to speak, to thank him, but nothing came out except a small whimper. Her legs gave out entirely, and suddenly she was being lifted, carried across the threshold into warmth and light. The door closed behind them, shutting out the howling wind, and the sudden absence of noise was almost as overwhelming as the temperature change. "Can you hear me?" the man asked, setting her down in a chair near a large stone fireplace where a fire blazed. "Blink twice if you understand." She managed it, though even that small movement felt difficult. "Good. You are badly chilled but not frozen, I think. Can you feel your fingers and toes?" She tried to assess and managed a small shake of her head. "That is what I thought. I am going to remove your gloves and boots. It will hurt when the feeling comes back, but that pain is good. It means you are not losing anything to frostbite." He moved with practiced efficiency, kneeling before her and carefully working her gloves off. His hands were warm and gentle despite their obvious strength. When her fingers were exposed, he examined them carefully, then wrapped them in a cloth that must have been warming by the fire. Then he turned his attention to her boots, unlacing them with care and easing them off along with her stockings. She knew she should be mortified, having a strange man handle her this way, but survival trumped propriety. "Your feet are very cold, but I see no blackening," he said. He wrapped them in warm cloths as well. "What is your name?" "Lillian," she managed to stammer. "Lillian Garrett." "Zachary Irving," he said. "This is my cabin, such as it is. You are safe here, Miss Garrett, though I should tell you you are likely stuck here for a while. This storm is going to last at least 2 more days, maybe 3. "My horse," she said. "In my barn," she nodded. "I will see to him once I know you are stable. First, we need to warm you properly." He stood and moved to a small stove in the corner where a pot was simmering. He ladled something into a tin cup and brought it back to her. "Broth. Drink it slowly." He held the cup to her lips and she sipped. It was chicken broth, rich and salty and absolutely perfect. The warmth of it spread through her chest, and she thought she had never tasted anything so wonderful. He let her drink about half the cup, then set it aside. "More in a few minutes," he said. "Too much too fast will make you sick." "How long were you out in the storm?" "Hours," she said. "Since morning. We were trying to reach the next settlement, but the storm came up so fast." His eyes sharpened. "A wagon train. We scattered when it got bad. I do not know where the others went." He nodded grimly. "Not much can be done until the storm passes. If they found shelter, they will survive. If not—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. She had not known the other families well, but they had shared meals and conversation for 3 days. The thought that some of them might not have made it to safety was almost too much to bear. "Do not think about that now," Zachary said, his voice gentler. "Think about warming up. Think about surviving. That is all you can do." She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the cloth-wrapped hands. The feeling was starting to come back into her fingers, and with it came pain, a fierce burning and tingling that made her gasp. "I know," Zachary said. "I am sorry, but it is a good sign." She gritted her teeth and endured it, focusing on the warmth of the fire and the solid walls around her. Slowly, the pain faded to a more manageable ache. Zachary gave her more broth and then some weak tea, and gradually she began to feel human again. Her feet went through the same painful revival as her hands, but eventually that too subsided into bearable discomfort. "I need to see to your horse," Zachary said when she seemed more stable, "and my own animals. Will you be all right here for a bit?" "Yes," she said. Her voice was stronger now, more like her own. "Thank you for everything. You saved my life." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you just have a will to live strong enough that you would have survived anyway. Rest. There is a bed through that door if you want to lie down. I will be back soon." He pulled on a heavy coat, wrapped a scarf around his face, and stepped out into the storm. The blast of cold air that came in with the open door made Lillian shiver despite the fire. She could not imagine going back out into that willingly, but Zachary did it without hesitation. The animals needed tending, and so he went. She sat by the fire for a few minutes, taking stock of her surroundings. The cabin was small, perhaps 20 feet square, with the main room containing the fireplace, the stove, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves lined with supplies. She could see through the open door to what must be the bedroom, containing a single bed with a worn quilt. Everything was neat but sparse, the home of a man who lived alone and had little use for decoration. Her body was exhausted, but she forced herself to stand and move around a bit, making sure everything still worked properly. Her legs were shaky but functional. She moved to the window and looked out, but all she could see was white. The storm showed no signs of abating. Zachary returned about 20 minutes later, covered in snow and breathing hard. He stamped his feet and shook off the worst of it before coming all the way inside. "Your horse is settled," he said. "Fed and watered. He is a good animal. He got you here." "He did," Lillian agreed. "I owe him my life as much as I owe you." "What is his name?" "Copper, for his color," Zachary nodded. "Fitting. Are you feeling better?" "Much better, yes. I think I will live after all." "Good. Then we should discuss sleeping arrangements." He held up a hand before she could speak. "You take the bed. I will sleep out here by the fire. It is not a hardship. I have done it many times." "I cannot take your bed," Lillian protested. "You can and will. You are still recovering and you need proper rest. Besides, this is not a negotiation, Miss Garrett. You are a guest in my home and guests get the bed. That is simply how it is." There was a firmness in his voice that suggested argument would be pointless. Lillian found she did not have the energy for it anyway. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You are very kind." "I am practical," he corrected. "There is a difference. Are you hungry?" "I have stew." She realized she was ravenous. "Very hungry, yes." He dished up 2 bowls of stew from a pot hanging over the fire and brought them to the table. Lillian sat and tasted it, finding it simple but hearty, full of meat and vegetables and thick with gravy. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Zachary spoke. "Where were you headed? Montana, you said." "Yes, to Billings. I have." She paused. "I had a teaching position waiting for me there, at the school." "Had?" "I was supposed to arrive by the end of January. I do not know if they will still want me if I am late." "Write them a letter when you can. Explain about the storm. Anyone reasonable will understand." "I hope you are right." "Why teaching?" he asked. "If you do not mind me asking." "My father was a teacher," she said. "In Philadelphia originally. He taught me to love books and learning. When he died last year, I decided I wanted to follow in his path, but Philadelphia was too full of memories. I wanted to start fresh somewhere new." "Wyoming territory is certainly new," Zachary said with a slight smile. "Different from Philadelphia, I would guess." "Very different," she agreed. "But I like it. Or at least I liked what I saw before the storm. It is beautiful in a stark way." "It is," he agreed. "I have been here 6 years now, came out from Ohio after the war." "You fought?" "I did." Union side. "Was young and stupid and thought war was glorious." His expression darkened. "Learned otherwise pretty quickly." Lillian nodded. The war had ended nearly 20 years ago, but its scars remained, particularly for those who had seen its horrors firsthand. "After it was over, I could not go back to Ohio," Zachary continued. "Too many ghosts. So I came west, tried my hand at various things, and eventually ended up here. Built this cabin 4 years ago. I raise horses mostly, some cattle, make enough to live on." "Do you ever get lonely?" The question was out before Lillian could stop it, and she immediately flushed. "I am sorry. That was impertinent. No, it is a fair question." Zachary was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes, yes, but I prefer loneliness to being around people who do not understand me. Out here I can be myself. No one expects me to be anything else." Lillian understood that sentiment more than she could say. She had felt out of place in Philadelphia after her father's death, surrounded by people who knew her story and looked at her with pity. Coming west had been about escape as much as opportunity. They finished their meal, and Zachary heated more water for tea. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the cabin, but inside it was warm and, surprisingly, comfortable. Lillian found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. There was something steady about Zachary Irving, something that made her feel safe. "You should rest," Zachary said eventually. "You have been through an ordeal. There is a nightgown in the chest at the foot of the bed. It was my mother's. She stayed with me one winter before she passed. You are welcome to use it." "Thank you," Lillian said. She stood, feeling the exhaustion catch up with her all at once. "Good night, Mr. Irving. Zachary, please. We are going to be in close quarters for a few days. Might as well dispense with formalities." "Then you should call me Lillian," he nodded. "Good night, Lillian. Sleep well." She went into the small bedroom and closed the door, though she did not latch it. She found the nightgown where Zachary had said it would be, a simple white cotton gown that was a bit large but clean and soft. She changed quickly, shivering in the cooler air of the bedroom, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was stuffed with straw and the quilt was heavy, and within minutes she was warm and drowsy. She fell asleep to the sound of the storm and the occasional movement from the main room as Zachary banked the fire and settled in for the night. Her last conscious thought was that she was lucky beyond measure to have found this place, to have been taken in by a man who was decent enough to help a stranger without question. She slept deeply and without dreams. When Lillian woke, pale light was filtering through the small window of the bedroom. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself, then remembered where she was. The storm was still raging outside, the wind still howling, but the cabin was warm and secure. She got up and dressed in her own clothes, which had dried overnight near the fire. They were wrinkled but wearable. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Zachary already up, tending to something on the stove. "Good morning," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Very well, thank you." "Better than I have in weeks." She moved closer to the fire, drawn by its warmth. "How long have you been up?" "A few hours. I went out to tend the animals early. The storm is as bad as ever. We are not going anywhere today." "I expected as much." She looked around. "Is there anything I can do to help? I feel useless just sitting here." "Can you cook?" "Adequately. My father and I managed on our own after my mother died when I was 12. Then you can help with breakfast." "I am making flapjacks, but I could use someone to watch them while I fry up some bacon." They worked together in the small kitchen space, moving around each other with surprising ease. Lillian found herself enjoying the simple domesticity of it, the comfortable silence broken only by the sizzle of bacon and the scrape of the spatula on the griddle. "You are good at this," Zachary observed, watching her flip a flapjack with practiced ease. "I had a good teacher. My father believed everyone should know how to feed themselves, regardless of gender. He taught me to cook, and I taught him to mend his own clothes." She smiled at the memory. "We made a good team. You miss him." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Every day. He was all the family I had left. When he died, it felt like the world had no anchor anymore. Everything just drifted." "I understand that feeling," Zachary said quietly. "Lost both my parents within a year of each other, my father during the war, my mother to fever shortly after. I was their only child. When they were gone, I was utterly alone." "I am sorry," Lillian said. "It is a hard thing being the last of your line." "It is," he agreed. "But life goes on. We adapt. We find new purposes, new reasons to keep going." They ate breakfast at the small table, the wind rattling the shutters but unable to penetrate the solid walls. After the meal, Zachary taught Lillian how to play checkers using a board and pieces he carved himself from wood during the long winter evenings. She proved to be a quick study, and soon they were evenly matched. "You are hustling me," Zachary said after she won her third game in a row. "You said you did not know how to play." "I said I had never played before," Lillian corrected with a slight smile. "That does not mean I cannot learn quickly," he laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his usually serious face. "I will remember that. Never underestimate Lillian Garrett." "Wise advice," she said, setting up the board for another game. The day passed with surprising speed. They played checkers, they talked. They read from the small collection of books Zachary kept on his shelves. He had a surprising variety: practical manuals on horse breeding and animal husbandry, but also novels by Dickens and Hawthorne, and a worn copy of Shakespeare's plays. "I did not take you for a reader," Lillian said, paging through A Tale of Two Cities. "Why, because I am a cowboy." There was amusement in his voice. "I suppose that is an unfair assumption," she admitted. "But yes, I confess I am surprised. My mother was a teacher like you," he explained. "She made sure I could read before I could barely walk, said it was the most important gift she could give me. She was right. Books have kept me sane through more lonely winters than I can count." "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was," Zachary said. "You would have liked her, I think, and she would have liked you." There was something in the way he said it, a warmth that made Lillian's heart skip slightly. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the rough exterior to the intelligent, lonely man beneath. He was handsome, she realized, in a rugged sort of way. Strong jaw, kind eyes, hair that fell across his forehead when he leaned forward to read. And there was a gentleness in how he moved, how he spoke to her, that was at odds with his rough surroundings. She forced herself to look back at the book. She could not afford to develop feelings for a man she had just met, a man whose life was here while hers was in Montana. This was temporary. In a few days, the storm would pass and she would leave, and they would never see each other again. That was simply the reality of the situation. But that night, as she lay in his bed listening to him moving around in the main room, she found herself thinking about how easy it had been to spend the day with him. How comfortable she felt in his presence. How his smile made something warm bloom in her chest. She told herself firmly that it was just gratitude, just the relief of being safe after such danger. Nothing more. And eventually, she fell asleep believing it. The second day was much like the first. The storm continued unabated, and Zachary and Lillian fell into an easy routine. They cooked together, played games, read, and talked. Zachary told her about his years learning to work with horses, about the satisfaction of training a wild animal to trust you. Lillian told him about her father's school, about the children she hoped to teach in Montana, about her dreams of making a difference in young lives. "You will be a good teacher," Zachary said with certainty. "You have patience and intelligence. That is most of what is needed." "I hope you are right. I worry sometimes that I am not cut out for it, that I am chasing my father's dream rather than my own." "Are you?" he asked, looking at her intently. "Is this his dream or yours?" She considered the question seriously. "Mine, I think. At least it has become mine. I love learning, and I love the idea of passing that love on to others. It feels right, somehow. Like this is what I am meant to do." "Then you are on the right path," Zachary said. "Trust that feeling. It is usually correct." That evening they sat by the fire as the wind howled outside, and Zachary asked her to tell him about Philadelphia. She painted a picture of the city for him. The cobblestone streets, the grand buildings, the crowds and noise and constant activity. She told him about the markets and the theaters, about the smell of the river and the sound of church bells on Sunday mornings. "You miss it?" he asked. Sometimes, she admitted. I miss the convenience of it, the access to culture and learning. But I do not miss feeling like I did not quite fit. Everyone there had known me since I was a child. I was always John Garrett's daughter, never just Lillian. Out here, I can be whoever I choose to be. That is why I came west too, Zachary said. To escape expectations. To build something that was entirely my own. He looked around the cabin. This may not be much, but it is mine. Every board, every nail, I built it with my own hands. It is a good home, Lillian said. It is solid and warm and welcoming. You should be proud of it. I am, he said quietly. But it has been lonely. I did not realize how lonely until you arrived, and suddenly it felt less like a shelter and more like a home. Lillian looked at him, her heart pounding. There was something in his eyes, something that made her breath catch. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Zachary, she began, but he shook his head. I know, he said. You are leaving as soon as the storm clears. You have a position waiting in Montana. I have no right to ask you to stay, no right to feel what I am feeling. I know all of that, but I wanted you to know anyway, that having you here has meant something to me, that you mean something to me. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. You mean something to me too, she said softly. More than I expected, more than I should allow given the circumstances. Life has strange timing, Zachary said with a sad smile. Maybe in another world you would have come to my door in summer and there would have been time to see where this might lead. Maybe, Lillian agreed. But we are in this world and I made a commitment. There is a school waiting for me. Children who need a teacher. I know, and I would not ask you to break your word. Your integrity is one of the things I admire about you. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the storm. I just wanted you to know, in case you felt the same and thought it was only you. It is not only me, Lillian said. I have been trying not to feel this way, trying to tell myself it is just circumstance and proximity. But I think I have known since yesterday that it is more than that. You are a good man, Zachary Irving. In another life, I think I could have loved you very much. He turned back to her, and the emotion in his face made her heart ache. In another life, he echoed. Those might be the saddest words I have ever heard. They stood there looking at each other across the small room, the fire crackling between them, and Lillian felt the weight of impossible choice pressing down on her. She could stay. She could give up Montana and build a life here with this man who had saved her, who made her laugh, who looked at her like she was something precious. Or she could go, honor her commitment, and wonder for the rest of her life what might have been. The storm raged on outside, holding the world at bay for just a little while longer. On the third day, the storm began to ease. The wind still blew, but the snow had stopped falling, and the howling had diminished to a steady but manageable gust. Zachary went out in the morning to assess the situation and came back with a thoughtful expression. The trails will be passable by tomorrow, he said. Day after at the latest. Lillian felt her stomach drop. She had known this moment was coming, but somehow she was not ready for it. That is good news, she said, trying to mean it. Is it? Zachary asked quietly. She met his eyes. I do not know any more. They spent the day in a state of unspoken tension, both aware that their time together was drawing to a close. They did not talk about it directly, but it colored everything they said and did. Every glance felt weighted, every casual touch of hands as they passed each other in the small space felt electric. That afternoon, Zachary went to check on the horses, and Lillian sat by the fire trying to sort through her feelings. She had been in this cabin for only 3 days, yet it felt like she had known Zachary Irving for years. There was a rightness to being with him, an ease and comfort that she had never felt with anyone except her father. The thought of leaving made her chest hurt, but the thought of staying terrified her. If she stayed, she would be giving up the teaching position, the plans she had made, the future she had envisioned. She would be building a life with a man she had known for less than a week, which any reasonable person would say was insanity. What if it did not work out? What if the feelings faded once the drama of the storm was past, and they were left with nothing but the reality of a hard life in an isolated cabin? But what if it did work out? What if this was the chance at happiness she had been seeking without knowing it? What if walking away from Zachary Irving was the biggest mistake she would ever make? She was still wrestling with these thoughts when Zachary returned, stamping snow from his boots. "The drifts are settling," he said. "You will be able to leave tomorrow if you want. I can guide you to the main trail, make sure you are headed in the right direction." "Thank you," Lillian said. Then, before she could stop herself, "What if I do not want to leave?" Zachary froze. What? What if I want to stay here, with you?" The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it is crazy. I know we have only known each other for 3 days. But I have never felt this way before, Zachary. I have never felt like I belonged somewhere the way I belong here. With you." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Lillian, I want you to stay more than I have wanted anything in years. But I need you to be sure. I need you to be certain that you are choosing this for the right reasons, not just because you are grateful that I took you in, not just because it is romantic and dramatic to give up everything for a man you barely know." "I am sure," she said, and as she said it, she realized it was true. "This is not about gratitude or romance. This is about feeling for the first time since my father died like I have found a home, not just a place but a person who feels like home. You do that, Zachary. You make me feel like I can finally stop running and just be." "What about the school?" "The children in Montana who need a teacher." "There will be other teachers," Lillian said, "but there is only one you, and maybe that is selfish, but I think my father would understand. He always told me that happiness was worth more than obligation, as long as you were not hurting anyone by choosing it. I will write to the school and explain. They will find someone else." Zachary searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She met his gaze steadily, letting him see the truth of what she was feeling. "Are you absolutely certain?" he asked one more time. "Because if you stay, Lillian, I am going to ask you to marry me. I am going to want you here permanently. I am going to build a life with you. And I need to know that you want that too." Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady. "Ask me." A slow smile spread across his face, the first truly unguarded expression she had seen from him. "Lillian Garrett, will you marry me? Will you stay here and help me turn this cabin into a home? Will you build a life with me here in Wyoming, even though it is hard and lonely sometimes and nothing like what you are used to?" "Yes," she said, and laughed because it felt so absurdly right. "Yes to all of it." He stood and pulled her up with him, and then his arms were around her, and she was holding him just as tightly. They stood there by the fire, wrapped in each other, and Lillian felt a sense of peace settle over her that she had not felt in years. When they finally pulled apart, Zachary was grinning like a fool. "I cannot believe you said yes. I cannot believe I am staying," Lillian said, "but it feels right. It feels like this is exactly where I am supposed to be." "We should get married soon," Zachary said. "The preacher comes through Coolidge once a month. The town is about 15 miles south of here. We can ride there when the weather clears fully and see when he is due next." "Coolidge," Lillian repeated. "I pass through there on my way north. It is a good town." "It is the closest thing to civilization we have out here," Zachary said. "There is a general store, a saloon, a church, maybe 50 people total. It is where I sell my horses and buy supplies." Over the next few days, as the weather gradually improved, they made plans. Zachary would take her to Coolidge to send her letters to Montana, and to inquire about the preacher. They would need to get Lillian's things from wherever her wagon had ended up, if they could find it. They would need to prepare the cabin for a permanent second resident, which meant building more storage and perhaps expanding the living space come spring. "I have been thinking about adding a room anyway," Zachary said, "for when we have children." Lillian felt her cheeks warm at the casual way he said it, as though their future children were already a certainty. But she liked that he was thinking ahead, making plans that included her. A week after the storm, the weather finally cleared enough for travel. Zachary saddled 2 horses, and they rode together toward Coolidge, following trails that were now passable though still snow-covered. The world was blindingly white and beautiful, the sky a perfect crystalline blue, and Lillian felt a surge of joy at being alive and on horseback with this man beside her. Coolidge was exactly as she remembered it, a small cluster of buildings huddled together as though for warmth, surrounded by endless white plains. They went first to the general store, where a woman named Mrs. Henderson greeted them with curiosity. "Zachary Irving, as I live and breathe," she said. "I have not seen you in town since before the storm, and who is this?" "This is Lillian Garrett," Zachary said. "She is going to be my wife." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. "Is that so? Well, congratulations are in order then. When did this happen?" "During the storm," Zachary said. "She was caught on the trail and made it to my cabin. We have been snowed in together for the past week." "Have you now?" Mrs. Henderson looked between them with a knowing smile. "That must have been quite an adventure." "It was," Lillian said warmly. "Zachary saved my life. And then I decided I did not want to leave." "Smart girl," Mrs. Henderson said approvingly. "Zachary Irving is one of the good ones. You could do far worse." They arranged for Lillian to send her letters from the store, which served as the unofficial post office. Then they inquired about the preacher. "Reverend Thomas was just through last week," Mrs. Henderson said. "He will not be back until late February. But if you are in a hurry, Justice Miller can marry you. He has the authority, being the local magistrate." Zachary looked at Lillian. "What do you think? Would you prefer to wait for the Reverend?" "I do not want to wait," Lillian said honestly. "If Justice Miller can do it, let us do it now." So they were married that afternoon in the small office behind the general store, with Mrs. Henderson and her husband serving as witnesses. Justice Miller was a gruff old man with kind eyes who read the words of the ceremony from a well-worn book and pronounced them man and wife with a satisfied nod. "Take care of her, Zachary," he said, shaking the younger man's hand. "With my life," Zachary promised. They bought supplies at the store, including fabric for new curtains and a wedding ring that Mrs. Henderson produced from a locked box behind the counter. "It was my mother's," she explained. "She left it to me, but my husband had his grandmother's ring to give me. I have been saving this for someone who needed it. Seems like that might be you." The ring was simple gold, worn smooth with age, and it fit Lillian's finger perfectly. She looked at it in wonder, this tangible symbol of the commitment she had just made. They rode back to the cabin in the late afternoon light, the sun painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. When they arrived, Zachary swept Lillian into his arms and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irving," he said, setting her down gently. "It is a good name," Lillian said. "I like the sound of it." That night, they celebrated their marriage with a simple meal and the remains of a bottle of whiskey Zachary had been saving for a special occasion. They talked about the future, about the horses they would raise and the garden Lillian wanted to plant come spring. They talked about children, about how many they wanted and what they would name them. "I have always liked the name James for a boy," Zachary said. "After my father, James Irving," Lillian tested. "I like it. And for a girl, perhaps Caroline, that was my mother's name. James and Caroline it is then, Zachary said, though we might want a few more than just two. We have time to decide, Lillian said, warmth spreading through her at the thought of a future filled with children and laughter and life. Later, in the privacy of the bedroom, Zachary was gentle and patient, making their first night as husband and wife everything Lillian had hoped it would be. Afterward, as she lay in his arms listening to his steady breathing, she thought about the strange path that had led her here. If not for the storm, if not for that desperate struggle through the snow, she would be in Montana right now, alone in a boarding house, preparing to start a job she had never truly wanted. Instead, she was here. She was home. She was exactly where she belonged. The winter passed slowly but pleasantly. Lillian settled into life at the cabin, learning the routines of feeding animals and maintaining a household in harsh conditions. She discovered she had a knack for working with the horses, and Zachary taught her everything he knew about training and breeding them. "You are a natural," he said one afternoon, watching her coax a nervous mare to take an apple from her hand. "Better than I was when I started." "I have a good teacher," she said. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and read to each other, or play checkers, or simply talk about anything and everything. Lillian learned about Zachary's time in the war, about the friends he had lost, and the nightmares that sometimes woke him in the dead of night. She learned that he was afraid of failure, of not being enough, of losing the people he loved. She shared her own fears with him, that she was not strong enough for this life, that she would wake up one day and regret her impulsive decision to stay. "You are the strongest person I know," Zachary told her. "You rode through a blizzard that would have killed most people. You made a choice to completely change your life based on what your heart told you was right. That is not weakness, Lillian. That is courage." His words helped quiet the doubts that sometimes crept in during the long winter nights. Spring came late to Wyoming that year, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that quickly turned green. Lillian planted the garden she had been planning, putting in vegetables and herbs and a small patch of flowers just for beauty. She watched with satisfaction as the tiny sprouts pushed through the soil, reaching for the sun. Zachary expanded the cabin as he had promised, adding a second bedroom that would serve as a nursery when the time came. Lillian helped with the construction, learning to saw and hammer under his patient instruction. By summer, the addition was complete, and the cabin felt more spacious and permanent. In July, Lillian discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after supper, nervous despite knowing he would be happy. "I think we are going to have a baby," she said. "In January, if my calculations are correct." The joy on his face was immediate and absolute. He stood and pulled her into a careful embrace, holding her as though she were made of glass. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see that he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "Lillian, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, and now a child. I feel like the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Lillian continued her work with the horses as long as she was able, then switched to lighter tasks as her belly grew. Mrs. Henderson came to visit several times, bringing supplies and advice, and the two women became fast friends. "You have made quite a life for yourself out here," Mrs. Henderson observed one afternoon, looking around the tidy cabin and the thriving garden. "Most women from back east would have given up and gone home by now." "I am home," Lillian said simply. "This is exactly where I want to be." Winter came again, and with it the familiar challenge of cold and snow. But this time, Lillian was not fighting for survival. She was safe and warm and surrounded by love. Zachary was attentive and protective, constantly worrying that she was doing too much or not resting enough. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him fondly. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "Not my woman carrying my child," he countered. "That is happening for the first time in history as far as I am concerned." In mid-January, almost exactly a year after the storm that had brought them together, Lillian went into labor. Mrs. Henderson had come to stay with them a week earlier, anticipating the birth, and she took charge immediately, sending Zachary to boil water and fetch towels while she helped Lillian through the contractions. It was long and difficult, as births often are, but finally, as dawn light filled the cabin, Lillian delivered a healthy baby boy. Zachary was allowed back into the room to meet his son, and the expression on his face as he held the tiny bundle made Lillian cry despite her exhaustion. "James," Zachary said softly, "James Irving, welcome to the world, little man." The baby responded by waving a tiny fist and making a sound that might have been a cry or might have been a yawn. "He is perfect," Lillian said. "Absolutely perfect." "He is," Zachary agreed, carefully placing the baby in her arms. "Just like his mother." Those first weeks with a newborn were exhausting but wonderful. Lillian marveled at how something so small could be so demanding, how she could be so tired yet so completely happy. Zachary was a devoted father, taking over household tasks and nighttime feedings whenever possible, doing everything he could to ease her burden. "I never knew I could love something this much," he confessed one night, watching James sleep in the new cradle he had built. "I thought I understood love when I married you, but this is different. This is terrifying." "I know," Lillian said, slipping her arm around his waist. "Every time I look at him, I think about all the things that could go wrong, all the dangers in the world. It is overwhelming." "But worth it," Zachary said. "Absolutely worth it," she agreed. Life settled into a new rhythm with 3 of them in the cabin. The seasons cycled through again. Spring with its mud and new growth. Summer with its endless work and long daylight hours. Fall with its harvest and preparation for winter. Winter with its cold beauty and enforced rest. James grew from a baby into a toddler, learning to walk and talk and get into every kind of mischief a small child could devise. He was fearless and curious, traits that gave Lillian endless anxiety and Zachary endless amusement. "He is just like you were at that age, I imagine," Lillian said, watching James try to climb onto a fence rail for the dozenth time. "Probably," Zachary admitted. "My mother said I gave her gray hairs before I was 5. When James was 2, Lillian became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. She worried about the baby, but Mrs. Henderson assured her that every pregnancy was different and sickness was often a good sign. "Means everything is working the way it should," she said. "You just rest and let that husband of yours take care of you." In September, Lillian gave birth to a daughter. Caroline, they named her, after Lillian's mother, and she was tiny and delicate with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. James was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. "Gentle," Lillian reminded him for the 100th time. "Baby Caroline is very small. You have to be gentle." "I am gentle, Mama," James insisted, very carefully patting his sister's head. "I love her." Watching her children together, Lillian felt a contentment so profound it almost hurt. This was what she had been seeking without knowing it. This sense of family, of belonging, of building something that would last beyond her own lifetime. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. The cabin was expanded again, adding a proper second story with more bedrooms. The horse operation grew as well, and Zachary developed a reputation for training excellent animals. People came from as far as Montana and Colorado to buy Irving horses. James and Caroline were joined by another brother when James was 5 and Caroline was 3. They named him Thomas, after the reverend who had finally blessed their union in a ceremony 2 years after their original marriage. Thomas was calmer than James, but just as curious, always asking questions about how things worked and why. Lillian taught all 3 children to read and write, using the skills her father had taught her, and the books Zachary kept adding to their shelves. She discovered she loved teaching her own children even more than she had thought she would love teaching strangers. They were bright and eager to learn, and she felt her father's pride in passing on his love of knowledge to another generation. When James was 10, he started helping seriously with the horses, showing the same natural talent his mother had. Caroline preferred the garden and the domestic tasks, but she had a gift for numbers that astounded both her parents. Thomas remained curious about everything, collecting rocks and insects and constantly asking to hear stories about the wider world. "You ever regret staying?" Zachary asked Lillian one night. They were sitting on the porch they had built the previous summer, watching the sun set over the plains. The children were inside, supposedly going to bed but more likely still awake and talking. "Not even for a moment," Lillian said honestly. "Do you ever regret asking me to? How could I? You gave me all of this." He gestured toward the cabin, toward the sounds of children's voices and laughter. "You turned my solitary existence into a life." "We did that together," Lillian corrected. "I could not have built this life without you." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as they had countless times before, and Lillian thought about that long-ago blizzard. About stumbling through the snow, more dead than alive, and finding this door. About Zachary opening it and saying those strange words, "I have been waiting for this storm." "Did you really know?" she asked suddenly. "That day I arrived, did you really know the storm would bring someone?" "I did not know it would be you specifically," Zachary said. "But yes, I had a feeling. The storm was so bad and the trail ran so close to my land. I kept thinking that if anyone was caught in it, they might make it to my door, and I wanted them to. I wanted someone to save, someone to help. I was so tired of being alone. So the storm brought me to you and you were ready." "I was ready," he agreed, "and you were brave enough to knock, and here we are." "Here we are," Lillian echoed, squeezing his hand. More years passed. The children grew and changed. James became a talented horseman, eventually taking over most of the training from his father. Caroline's skill with numbers led her to managing the business side of the operation, keeping meticulous records of sales and expenses. Thomas, to everyone's surprise, showed an interest in medicine after helping Mrs. Henderson tend to a neighbor's injury, and talk began of sending him to study in a larger city when he was old enough. "Can we afford it?" Lillian asked Zachary when Thomas was 15 and seriously discussing medical school. "We can," Zachary said. "The horse operation has done well, and if this is what he wants, if he wants to be a doctor, then we should help him achieve that." "Your mother would be proud," Lillian said. "That we are giving our children opportunities you did not have." "I am proud," Zachary said, "of all of them, of us. Look at what we built, Lillian." She looked around at their expanded home, at the barn and corrals full of beautiful horses, at the garden that was bigger and more productive every year. She looked at her children, nearly grown now, healthy and smart and kind. She looked at her husband, gray threading through his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, but still strong and vital and looking at her with the same love he had shown that first night. "We built something good," she agreed. James married at 22. bringing home a girl from Coolidge named Sarah who fit into the family as though she had always been there. They built a small house on the property and started their own family, giving Lillian and Zachary their first grandchild, a girl named Lillian after her grandmother, when they were in their late 40s. Caroline married a young banker from Denver, who was smart enough to appreciate her mind and kind enough to let her continue working with the family business even after the wedding. They split their time between Denver and the ranch, and Caroline ensured that the Irving horse operation became known throughout the territory and eventually the state, once Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890. Thomas did go to medical school, studying in Chicago for 4 years and returning as doctor. Thomas Irving, ready to serve the scattered communities of Wyoming. He set up a practice in Coolidge and became the most sought-after doctor in the region, known for his skill and his compassion. 3 successful children, Mrs. Henderson said at Caroline's wedding. She was elderly now but still sharp, still visiting regularly. "You and Zachary must be so proud." "We are," Lillian said, "but more than their success, I am proud of their character. They are good people. That matters more than anything they achieve." "Spoken like a true teacher, Mrs. Henderson said with a smile. "You know, you ended up teaching after all, not in a schoolhouse but something more important. You taught your children and through them you will teach their children. That is a legacy worth having." As Lillian grew older, she often thought about the strange path her life had taken. If that wagon train had not split, if the storm had not hit, if she had not found Zachary's cabin, if he had not opened the door, so many small chances and choices that had led to this rich, full life. She and Zachary grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds and spirits remaining sharp. They watched their grandchildren grow, and eventually their great-grandchildren. The house that had started as a small cabin had become the center of a sprawling family compound, with multiple buildings and dozens of people who called the Irving Ranch home. On a winter evening in 1920, nearly 40 years after that fateful blizzard, Lillian and Zachary sat together by the fire in the original cabin, which had been preserved even as the family home expanded around it. Both were in their 70s now, moving slowly but still capable of caring for themselves. "You remember the first night we met?" Zachary asked. It was a story they had told countless times to their children and grandchildren, but it never grew old. "Of course," Lillian said. "I thought I was going to die, and then there you were, opening the door." "I have been waiting for this storm," Zachary quoted, shaking his head at his younger self. "What a strange thing to say." "But true," Lillian said. "You were waiting, whether you knew it or not. And I was coming, fighting my way through that snow to get to you." "Best storm of my life," Zachary said. "Brought me everything I never knew I needed." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling, the wind outside gentle compared to that long-ago blizzard. "I love you," Lillian said. "I have loved you since that first day, even though I did not realize it at the time." "I love you too," Zachary said. "Every day since you walked through that door has been a gift." They continued to live on the ranch for several more years, surrounded by family, until Zachary passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Lillian mourned him deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together. She lived another 5 years, spending her final days in the cabin that had sheltered her from that long-ago storm, surrounded by the family that had grown from her decision to stay. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed, and she told them one final time the story of the blizzard and the cowboy who had opened his door. "Make brave choices," she told them. "Follow your heart, and never underestimate the power of a single storm to change your entire life." She closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully, her hand held by her daughter Caroline, her room full of the people who existed because of a blizzard and a choice and a love that had lasted nearly 4 decades. The ranch continued to thrive for generations after, and the story of Zachary and Lillian became family legend. The original cabin was maintained as a memorial, and every winter, when the first big snow fell, the Irving family would gather there to tell the story of how it all began. Of a woman fighting through a storm, of a man who opened his door, and of a love that built something that would last far beyond either of their lifetimes. The blizzard had brought her to his door. He had opened it wide. And together, they had created a legacy of love and family that would endure for as long as the Wyoming plains stretched wide, and the winter storms came sweeping down from the mountains. Their story was one of chance and choice, of bravery and love, of building something from nothing in a wild place that became home. It was a story worth remembering, worth retelling, worth celebrating. And in the hearts of their descendants, Zachary and Lillian Irving lived on, forever young, forever standing at that threshold where a storm had ended and a love story had begun.